The hard place, like a wind from Goldland he sweeps by, blown far from his homeland in search of glory and honor. We walk in the garden of his turbulence.
Hello and welcome to Movie Joust. My name is Jesse Nussman, a film critic living here in Atlanta, Georgia, and with me on the other line, straight from the compound, wearing their weird what are those things? Are they pig vultures? It's Jason Evans and Josh Sewell here today.
Oh my God, that's where we're starting. Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, my brain's not ready for that yet.
we gotta start things off hot. You know, you gotta catch the viewer and the listener in the first like 15 seconds.
There you go.
Guys, welcome. Today we're gonna test out a new idea for this show. We've been trying to get some more arguments, really lean into the joust in Movie Joust. So we're going to be periodically discussing older movies with more divisive receptions or maybe negative receptions, but one of us really likes them, or maybe a couple of us really like them. Today, there's no better place to start than M. Night Shyamalan, one of the most divisive filmmakers on the planet, I would argue. And Josh, you decided that we should talk about The Village, which I thought was a really exciting... That was you, Jason?
It was me. I'm the one defending The Village, man.
Okay, well,
I was all set to take the credit, you know.
I look, there are so many texts flowing in the group chat that it's easy to get confused when there's three J's. But guys, before we can get into the fun, we do have to take a moment and pull out our 40s and just pour a little over the open grave, because we lost a real legend this past week. One of my favorite filmmakers, one of my favorite people on the planet, David Lynch, passed away. I could probably go on for like 5 hours about how much I love David Lynch and how much his movies mean to me and how much they changed the way I not only thought about film as a medium, but art as like what good art could be. But I'm curious, like you guys, like what is your relationship to David Lynch as we now kind of look back on this, career of 10 pretty, now still, well, maybe 9 acclaimed movies and one that's got like a cult following and then like a pretty iconic TV show. What is you guys' relationship to Lynch?
I mean, I'll go ahead and say, and this is going to sound terrible, I'm not the hugest David Lynch fan. I find his films, his TV shows, a lot of it is very inscrutable. It leaves me like wondering what I just saw. And I think that's the way he wanted it. And that's fine. It's not necessarily what I love to experience as a film. That said, the dude was incredibly influential. He knew what he wanted to put on screen, whether it be big screen or smaller square screen. And he got great performances out of the people that he worked with. He's easily one of the most important filmmakers of the past half century, and an individual who loved the movies and loved the ability to tell stories that way. We are a way poorer place for not having him around, and anyone who can inspire the kind of almost cult-ish following that he had for his films. And I'm not saying that in a bad way at all. That tells you how important they are and how much their ideas grab people and make people want to see more.
Yeah, I think you can't. It's also worth noting, like, he's one of the few filmmakers that, like, has become an adjective. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Lynchian, like...
It's a thing.
To just describe something. Josh, what's your kind of relationship with Lynch?
Yeah, he's a filmmaker that it kind of seems like I've always, admired and respected his films more than I've like quote loved them. But
ditto,
like
exactly
Jason
me.
Said, where
yeah,
it feels like that might be his intention anyway. As a filmmaker who's always, kept the audience at arm's length a little bit. He's like, no, I'm not going to help you figure this out. You're going to be big boys and girls and do the thinking on your own. Really, really like a lot of his work. Mulholland Drive's incredible. Of other stuff, like I've tried, like I know sacrilege alert, I've tried Twin Peaks multiple times, and just kind of fizzled out a few episodes into the first season. I guess that's going to be my 2025 goal now, is to finally tackle the beast that is Twin Peaks, just in honor of a fallen legend. But I do think it says a lot about the guy as a person, as an artist, that just the outpouring of love and support and grief you've seen in the days since his loss. I've never seen a filmmaker whose colleagues and the actors that he's worked with in the past speak so highly and reverently of somebody. And just the fact that even somebody like even people who've never seen his films know who he is. He's almost become like a mascot for film. Even if you've never seen his films, he's a meme. You know, he's
the weather reports really got me through the pandemic.
Yeah, and stuff that even, that isn't technically his creation, like a filmmaker who's also a heck of an actor. Like that last scene in The Fabelmans is iconic.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, he's so funny.
So like I said, even though I will be the first to admit I'm not like a number one fan, you still can't look at the guy and not, admire his filmography.
I mean, really quick, I just wanted to say, as great a director as he was, as great of a storyteller as he was, for people to like put him in the box of, oh, he was a movie and TV director, he was so much more. Like, if you look at his credits, like he was like sound designer on a lot of his movies and TV shows.
He made music, paintings, like it. The dude was always
Wicked
working.
Game? Hang on a second.
Yeah.
He directed one of the most iconic music videos of all time, Chris
Absolutely.
Isaak's Wicked Game. Josh mentioned the acting, like him as John Ford at the end of The Fabelmans. What a chef's kiss
Yeah.
of a way.
I can't describe to you how like happy that made me seeing that movie, like on the opening night at TIFF. I was there, and just the like everyone in that theater, you could just like feel the energy lift up of everyone. Was just like, I'm so happy he's in this, and this is just like such joy. I know it's weird to bring up Louis C.K. these days, but like the one episode of Louis C.K.'s show where Lynch plays like the network executive and is just like screaming at Louis C.K. of just like, funny, be funny, 1, 2, 3, go. It's like one of my favorite episodes of television ever. I'll just close out by saying, like, to encourage anyone if they're curious of checking out, like, yeah, Lynch's stuff, like, to me, it operates in this weird dream logic, and if you try and understand it in this sort of like literal way, it maybe doesn't make sense. But I think there's something that was always emotionally present about his movies that like really, like, even if you didn't understand like what is going on in his movies, like it always like got a reaction out of you. And it's interesting. Like, it was weird. Just this past weekend, my girlfriend was like, oh, can we watch Mulholland Drive? Because I know that's one of your favorite movies. And I was like, I mean, it's weird. I'll warn you. And even though a kind of testament to Lynch of like, we got to the end of the movie and she had like a wildly different opinion than I did about how all the different pieces fit together. But the entire time when I kept looking over to her and being like, Art, how are you liking it and stuff? She was like, I'm riveted. Like, this thing is funny. It's romantic. It's scary in places. And so of like that thing of even when you maybe were not always understanding like what is exactly happening in his movies, it like hits something deep inside of you where you're like, I can't look away no matter like what I'm so like drawn into like his best movies. So I don't know. R.I.P. to a giant. I'll really miss him. So
have a slice of pie, chain smoke some cigarettes.
Yeah. You guys want to join me for to smoke a pack and have a black coffee in his honor today?
That would be perfect. He would appreciate it.
Yeah. Guys, let's now get into talking about Le Village, as the French say. Jason, why did you pick M. Night Shyamalan's The Village as the movie for us to joust about today?
Well, I mean, honestly, I was sort of looking at some films that get bad numbers on Rotten Tomatoes, meaning other critics don't like them, that I still appreciate and like, and this is one of the ones that jumped out. I also think that there's an interesting sort of story to be told of M. Night Shyamalan's career, starting out so high with The Sixth Sense, with Unbreakable, and then kind of going downhill for a little while before picking up. And you know, I think most of us would say, look, the trough at the bottom there of The Lady in the Water, Happening,
Ugh.
Avatar: The Last Air. Yeah, I mean and After Earth, like that.
Although,
Those
can we really
four
blame him
movies-
for that? Is that really more like Will Smith deserves the blunt of that blame?
Look, when you come to director, his name is on the credit. Those four movies are abominations. They're terrible films. But then he picks up and he has a nice run now of some very good films and some really interesting. I happen to love Knock on the Cabin. There's several of his recent films that are old is pretty darn good.
I really liked Old. I really liked Trap this past year, and was just flabbergasted when I saw that had the bad reviews it did. I was just sort of like, do none of you know how to have fun?
Yeah. And he's also, it's sort of interesting that he's kind of divorced himself from the big studio whole realm. Everything he does is sort of self-financed. One movie finances the next. Now, there's some flaws in that. When he made Glass, he had to make it very confined, and it's a big problem that he didn't get more money for what I think all of us thought would be a really wonderful ending of this trilogy of film. But in any event, to go back to The Village, it's a film that is not well liked by critics. I think fans think that this is one of the films as he's tumbling down the hill from The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable. And I happen to think it's a film that is great in terms of the mood that it creates. I think it has a lot of really interesting ideas. I'm not going to defend what is an outrageous ending, but the journey from the beginning to that ending, I think, is really interesting, and it has an incredible cast, and he gets good performances out of them. I don't know why this is a film that is not liked a little bit more. It's not The Sixth Sense. It's not. I'm not going to say this is an award quality movie.
There's an argument to be made that
film.
it is better made than The Sixth Sense, though. Certainly, I certainly think it is his most on a sheer craftsman level. Roger Deakins shot this movie.
I was going to say Roger Deakins is and the cinematography in this film is off the charts. There is one scene where Bryce Dallas Howard, by the way, cast, really great cast. Mm-hmm. When you remember that Sigourney Weaver is in this film, and William Hurt and Adrian Brody, and Joaquin Phoenix. This is Adrian Brody. Okay, all right.
We can get to that later.
I know it's a weird character, and all right. But the scene where Bryce Dallas Howard is standing outside, everyone is going inside because they're afraid of the monsters. She is standing there in the mist, waiting for Joaquin Phoenix to come back because she loves him so much, and they're all terrified of these monstrous things that are coming. And you, the mist that is around them, the darkness, the shadows, the monsters at one point are approaching on the porch, and then Joaquin Phoenix grabs her hand and brings her indoors and closes the door. It's like that whole scene probably goes on for about 2 minutes of nothing but us being on edge, waiting and waiting and waiting for him to get there. It is fabulous filmmaking and gorgeous, gorgeous filmmaking. How can you say that this is a terrible movie just because Adrian Brody puts on a really weird performance and the ending is ridiculous? No, in between those things, there's a lot of greatness.
So I think that what's like a middle ground between Joust and Love Fest? I think that's where I kind of land with this, because I can't take issue with any of the arguments that you've just made. Like you said, the cast is fantastic. Joaquin Phoenix is in rare not a weirdo mode. He's just like a decent guy.
It's actually like the kind of Phoenix performance that I wish we got a little bit more of now, which is like I really miss like Sweetie Pie, like soulful Phoenix, like him in like the James Gray movies, or like I think he's great in Her, or what's the Signs, the other M. Night movie that he's in.
Oh, he's great in Signs. Yeah.
But so cast wise, fantastic. You've already mentioned the Adrian Brody-ness of it all, which I would argue, yes, it's sort of his fault for taking the role, but the role as written, he did what he could with it. But for me, this sort of marks the beginning of the era of the humbling of M. Night. This is where he's starting to believe his own hype as the new Hitchcock or the new Spielberg. Somebody wrote, this is right before we get that book that somebody wrote as he's making Lady in the Water.
That's right.
Yeah, where like they just got some deadly quotes like straight from his mouth, and you're just like, dude.
That's the real one. That's like, this guy is like has really drank the Kool-Aid as Lady in the Water, in my opinion.
The beginning of the plummet, where like you can see the really good things about him as a filmmaker and the really awful things about him as a filmmaker kind of wrestling for dominance. And yes, I agree with you. There are the kernels of something really interesting here, but this is one of the first films that, to me at least, feels like he started with the twist and worked backwards, as opposed to something like The Sixth Sense, where, enough time has passed that, like, even if the big, spoilers for a 25-year-old movie, Bruce Willis was dead the whole time, like...
What?
I know! But even if you know that going in, it's still a great movie, because it's not about Bruce Willis being a ghost. It's about fractured family relationships and emotional healing, and the most emotionally powerful moments of that movie have nothing to do with ghosts, and Unbreakable, same way. It is him deconstructing the superhero genre about 5 years too early. I feel like if this movie came out just right, pre Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man, like the reasons that movie works are the same reason Deadpool is now $1 billion franchise. Like it's taking things that you have to understand about the genre to understand what he's doing with them. And, that kind of stuff really worked. Signs, I'll go to bat, no pun intended, I'll go to bat for in Signs. But for me...
Wait. Hang on. I have to ask, was that intentional? I'll go to bat for Signs.
As it was coming out of my mouth, I went, oh no. I'm just in dad mode. So, dad joke mode. But yeah, with those three movies, it feels like the characters and the emotional narrative feels like it's at the heart of those movies. Whereas The Village, for me, marks the time where like plot kind of takes over, or I'm gonna get you, like it feels like he starts getting in love with his own storytelling to me, when those really brief moments of those other films were never my favorite part of those films.
I think one of the reasons the twist in The Village like really doesn't work for me is like the twist in The Sixth Sense, as you mentioned, like you can go back and watch and you're like, this thing is airtight, like, or you go back and you're like, oh my God, it's so obvious the entire time. Or you go back and you're like, this still works, and this still sort of like makes the world of the movie and the scenes as they are playing out still make sense once you know the information about Bruce Willis being a ghost. Whereas The Village, I would argue, for like all of its like impeccable craft and like amazing performances, and is like, I'll agree with Jason, is maybe like some of the best just like pure filmmaking he's ever done. Like I will kind of agree with you, Josh, of like the problem with the twist for me is like once it's revealed, you're kind of like, this movie doesn't make sense now. Of like, if you go back and then like watch it knowing the twist of like, oh, it's actually this kind of like cult that's operating in, you know, I believe the inspiration was the like
Cult?
Foxcatcher Ranch. Sure. What?
I don't know
a
that
li-
they're a cult. They're just I
Little
was going to
pagan
say
people.
to me it's a really good movie right up until the second twist, because there are two twists that come sort of back to back. The first one being the monsters are really the adults, and that they are just trying to keep they're trying to keep the village together. And then the second twist is, oh, and this is happening in modern times. And that second twist to me is where you go, what the heck? And it doesn't really make sense. Although I've read some stuff, you can piece together ways that this could potentially work. I'm not a big fan of like, I need to, after the movie, go around and kind of talk to people and we can all come up with a theory of how the movie actually. I'd rather the movie make sense on its own. So I get that. I think the first twist is great. I think it absolutely, when it's revealed that Adrian Brody is lying in that ditch dying, and Bryce Dallas Howard, by the way, doesn't know. When it's revealed that you know it's the adults keeping the kids there, to me that's a really interesting. To me, I'm still very much in the movie at that moment.
But then isn't there still like a weird, like I sometimes have an issue with like, because there's that scene where William Hurt like takes her into the shed and like show like, I mean, I guess he can't like show her because she's blind, but like basically like has her feel out the monster costume, and then she goes into the woods, and then there's that whole thing of like, oh, but are the monsters actually real? And she's like scared because one of them is hunting her or something like that's one of the aspects of the movie where I was like, I've just been explained that the monsters aren't real. Why do I now need to fear that there's maybe one of them coming out after her, whether it's Adrian Brody or not?
So what I would say is, I'm not here saying that this is a perfectly constructed film. Not by a long shot. But I think that the really strong moments that it has emotionally, in terms of atmosphere, I mean, like the sense of dread and fear are just palpable on screen at times. All those things to me, I sort of enjoy the journey more than the destination. And yeah, I mean, look, I said at the beginning, as we start to get to the destination, the film starts to go downhill. But frankly, the path to there, to me, is still very, very enjoyable. And this is a movie that it's not on cable or streaming all that often. But when it is there, if I catch it at the right moment, I'm in for a little while. I'll probably drop off right towards the ending. But I'm in for a little while, and to me, that's not a bad film. I think that it takes a good film to do that, because I don't rewatch stuff that's bad.
Well, I think that like if I'm gonna be fair, if I say that like there's the seeds of like the upcoming humbling of M. Night, I should also say that you've also got some seeds here for the filmmaker he's gonna become after he kind of comes to grips with who he is and who he's not. Like there is some scenes here that just show what a weird sense of humor the guy has. Like, he does not have your standard, like, setup punchline kind of jokes here. Like, that jarring cut where, like, Judy Greer is fantastic in this movie. We had mentioned her earlier, where she plays Bryce Dallas Howard's sister, who's like, I'm going to marry Joaquin Phoenix and blah, blah, blah. And it cuts from that to her just sobbing on her bed because he shot her down is hilarious. And then
the guy's an amazing, like, visual art, like, for all the complaints of like M. Night's characters, like, don't sound like real people, which is a complaint that I've kind of been less interested in over the years because it's all style anyways. But like something like Old, which I think like you mentioned, Jason, like, there's just like some incredible like visual filmmaking in that, and of just sort of like you understanding the narrative playing out by like where he's putting the camera. And I definitely agree with you, Josh, like comparing it to something like Trap recently, where like seeing that in a theater, it played like a comedy, and then like afterwards people being
Absolutely,
like, I don't understand, the Josh Hartnett performance is like so goofy and like oversized, and I'm like, That's the point.
That's the point.
It's a whole joke about like this guy is so clearly like a serial killer, but is trying so hard to be like girl dad, basically.
Yeah, any movie that has an innocent person being horribly disfigured in a grease fire for laughs, that kind of lets you know what level you're on with the movie that you're watching.
Can I ask you guys?
Has like the humor of, you guys know how like 50s Hitchcock movies kind of have that sort of like, it's kind of hokey, but it's like dad humor, you know what I mean? Like, or it's almost the humor of like a 7-year-old kid with a magnifying glass that's like burning ants for fun on the, like, M. Night just kind of has this sort of like mwahaha kind of like prankster sense of humor that is I think more closer to like, dad jokes or like a mischievous little kid that reminds me of, the Hitchcock sense of humor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
I was gonna say, can I ask you guys, what do you think is his worst film? Is it The Happening, Lady in the Water, or After Earth?
It's The Last Airbender. I mean,
okay.
that movie is unwatchable. Like that's one that I did not see in theaters, and then I was part of I'll fire this up for shits and giggles during the pandemic, and was like, I bet this can't be as bad as what people say. Like maybe it's a thing of like, I know people really love that animated show and it just like didn't quite give them what they want, and maybe it's just kind of a mediocre, like boring movie. And I turned it on and I was like, this thing is like a total disaster on like every level, and is like, it is like a season of TV like crammed into a 2-hour movie. The performances are bad. There's like the special effects look awful in it. Like that movie is just like embarrassing no matter who made it.
I feel like Last Airbender and After Earth, to me, like maybe I'm just trying to be nice here, but like those don't really feel like M. Night Shyamalan movies to me. Those feel like director for hire kind of movies. Whereas,
yeah, like they slapped his name on them so they could try to make a little extra money because he is bankable. Yeah, I agree. They feel like nothing else that he's made.
So
or
me,
that like when Lady in the Water and The Happening like kind of, flopped with audiences, like maybe of just sort of like, all right, we are no longer investing in just sort of like whatever is in your mind now, and of you just need to sort of like take projects as they come. As
so that's where I was going with that, was that I would argue that it's a toss up between Lady in the Water and The Happening is worst, and then After Earth and Airbender is him that's his like wandering around in the desert trying to figure out what his career is. And then emerging from that with The Visit. Was The Visit the first one he did after all that? Yeah. Which I believe so. Is also bad, but in a different way that I kind of respect a little more. And maybe that's just
the kids in it are a little obnoxious, but I think like it is kind of genuinely it's got that same like sicko sense of humor that we kind of touched on earlier.
Maybe that I think I need to go back and rewatch it, because maybe now that I sort of get the wavelength he's on a little more now, I might respond to that one a little differently. But
Split's really good. Split is where he's back.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm not going to agree with you guys on Split, but I do think James McAvoy is like really, really fun. My problem with Split is like it starts as like a like fun, trashy thriller, and then I think when it takes its turn in its final act and like, actually this is about mental health, guys, I'm like, you can't do this. You've had like a silly crazy man who like thinks he's a child and an old one. Like, we can't make this about like mental health and childhood trauma anymore.
So you're telling me that the filmmaker who made Adrian Brody the villain in The Village, like blindsided
that's can we just talk about the Adrian Brody thing for like 5 seconds? Fine. Of just, my only note is that's just a character we would not do that anymore. Like,
absolutely
I don't
not.
the like, let's get a like Oscar-winning actor to play someone who has a mental disability. I think like, has Tropic Thunder just like killed that forever?
I was gonna say, like, because with The Village, it's what if Simple Jack was a serial killer?
or like, I don't know if have you guys seen what's the Sean Penn movie? I Am Sam.
I am Sam.
Yeah,
Sam.
I watched that with my folks a couple years ago just because it was on Netflix, and they were like, "Oh, this sounds sweet." And like midway through, I think I turned to them and I was like, "Everyone involved in this movie needs to be arrested and like needs to do like community service of just sort of like." No, I can't believe anywhere down on the like approval line that someone was just like, let's maybe think about this for a few minutes.
I mean, I think we need to acknowledge that as a society, as creatives, not that we're creatives, but the people who do the creative stuff out of Hollywood, things have changed, and they have you could say matured. They have altered their view on what is acceptable and what is not, and when we view films from 30 years ago, we need to acknowledge that there are things in them that would not be acceptable today, and we should judge them for where they were. And at the time, making Adrian Brody into a jokester, mentally challenged guy who may have accidentally been killing and terrorizing people, that was okay. And we just need to acknowledge it happened.
So I was a kid at the time. What was the like response to that character like at the time? You guys are older than me, so I was a kid. So like I was not thinking about that when I saw this as a kid.
I think it kind of spoke to where we were culturally. That like I don't remember anybody talking about it.
Okay,
yeah, it wasn't a big deal. It was not a big deal.
The fact that it was able to happen was because nobody really thought anything about it.
Yeah, because like if you look like there's not like. Tom Hanks kind of gets to get away with it in Forrest Gump because it's not really like specified in that movie, and like Tom Hanks somehow has this magic to transcend everything. Dustin Hoffman,
other characters,
and he's the good guy. I mean,
yeah,
that's the thing.
But even like Dustin Hoffman, I think we're kind of chill with for Rain Man and like being like, we maybe wouldn't do that today, but like that works. But then like the other ones I'm thinking of where it's like a good guy is like I Am Sam, or what's the Cuba Gooding Jr. one that was like the real butt of jokes for years. Like there is kind of a cluster in like the early 2000s of like the Tropic Thunder joke, like like just straight on, like that's what we were doing.
Yeah,
we're not even saying the word.
No,
we're afraid to say the word.
Yeah. So again, like. It definitely is a time capsule in that way as well. So when you have, which I think it says a lot that to me that's not even the most problematic aspect of the film is, but again, I can't completely fault it for all the reasons Jason said, but to me it's absolutely one where I'm mixing up my cliches here, but like the parts are definitely bigger than the whole. Right, like it's not as good as the sum of its parts, but
I would 100% agree with that, and I think the big difference that I'm hearing in the three of us is I'm kind of willing to forgive the bad parts more than you guys, and
yeah. Would this be like in the top tier of M. Night movies for you, Jay? Like, would this make like a top 5 of M. Night movies? I feel like he's made enough at this point that like you could put a top 5 together. I
mean, probably not. I'm trying to think. I mean, obviously, Sixth Sense, Unbreakable. I said I really liked Split, and I like Old and Knock on the Cabin. I think that all 5 of those would be ahead of this. I put Signs ahead of this as well, although that's another one that where the ending makes the rest of it fall apart a little bit. But
I would disagree. I would argue the ending of Signs, while extremely hokey, actually fits in with like that movie is a Christian movie. Like if you go back and rewatch it, it's all about Mel Gibson as this
non-believer who right, I understand,
who learns to believe again, and there's this like running thing through the movie about like the bad things in our life like actually are like tiny little miracles that like prepare us for challenges later on, with like the Joaquin Phoenix not making the major leagues, or like the girl always needing water at night, and then like there's isn't there like a bit in there where like a vision, like Mel Gibson remembers something about what his wife said, like as she was dying or something, that then
Yes,
helps them
yes.
defeat the aliens. And it's this
Jesse,
whole.
I'm talking about the water.
Oh, I mean, sure.
That's the twist.
Yeah.
The fact that the aliens are allergic to water. That's not a good twist. Jesse.
Hey, they're not
But I agree with
the
you. Everything
best navigators and planet pickers in the world.
Really quick.
You don't hear anybody complaining that they're also allergic to bats to the head. You know?
Hey, really quick though, we were talking about, when Joaquin Phoenix has good performances and when Knight creates a great image on screen. I still think in Signs, the scene where Joaquin Phoenix is watching the TV broadcast.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And the alien walks through the scene on the TV. I mean, that is incredible filmmaking.
one of the-
I thought that was
Smart.
the scariest thing I'd ever seen when I was a kid and saw that movie.
Oh,
So I was gonna say,
100%.
It's one of the greatest horror moments of the 21st century. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you
the
guys see
reveal.
like the red carpet? I think it was for Trap. It was either like Trap or Old or one of his more recent movies, and like someone snapped a photo of like someone had a poster on the red carpet with like a picture of the snapshot of the alien doing the like Bigfoot walk across the screen, and it's like you scarred my childhood, M. Night, basically.
Knowing what we know about him now and his later films, I'm sure he wears that as a badge of honor. You know?
Yeah. I do want to ask you guys about what do you think about, because there was the theory posited by, the French really love M. Night. The French think he's one of the great American filmmakers. What do you think about the French critical theory on this movie, which is that it is about people that are so scarred by 9/11 that they want to remove themselves from society and like go back to this more Puritan period, and like that lining up with sort of like the Bush era kind of conservatism in America. You guys think the French are full of shit? What do you think about this as like a post 9/11 movie now, decades later?
If I'm putting on my film professor hat, I would say that there is absolutely a reading of that you could do. I'm not sure I buy that. It absolutely is a post 9/11 movie. I think it does provide you with a snapshot of sort of where the American psyche was at that time, that we're just sort of shell-shocked, battle-scarred, PTSD, whatever you want to call it. But I think, the American reaction to films at that time kind of defeat the argument he's raising there, where one of the things I talk to about my students, since I have to talk about 9/11 as like a historical event now instead of current events, none of my kids were alive then. It blows their mind when I tell them that like I was around for the discussions of like, well, I guess that just means no more action movies now. We're just not going to have those anymore. Or we're just not going to have comedies anymore because nobody's ever going to want to laugh again. And then, it was still a time where you had like the rental charts, like what's being rented at Blockbuster, and in the weeks after 9/11, your top two films were Independence Day and Die Hard. And so I think maybe it's, if you wanted to give some credence to that argument that it's Shyamalan saying like, well, this is where America's going to be now. We're in this post-ironic sort of everything's got to be literal and somber kind of mood. I feel like the facts kind of counteract that argument. But, as a thinking exercise, it's kind of fun.
I mean, so I would point out, first of all, this came out in 2004. So you're a few years past 9/11. Granted, whenever he started making it and started writing it and all that other kind of stuff. But the other thing I would say is I've got no problem if a film happens to reflect the mood of the day. In fact, that's what films should do. And when we look back on the movies made in the early aughts, we should look and see the influences that the defining, news event of the time had on everybody. I have no problem with that at all. And if you want to look and try and find aspects of societal's view of 9/11 in The Village, go for it. That just says to me that M. Night's trying to tap into something that people out there are feeling, and that's that's often where we get really good, really interesting filmmaking from. Yes, please go ahead and do it. And if the French are the ones who discovered it, more power to them.
I just thought it was a very like interesting kind of like a European read on like an American, it just sort of like, especially thinking about like this year, like the idea that movies like Amelia Perez or The Apprentice are like way more acclaimed over in Europe than here in the United States, and like that feeding into a like it's what the Europeans view what's going on or like their fascination with what's going on in the US, or around the same time as The Village. Like I know, and like I've come around to this, like the Spielberg War of the Worlds movie is to me like a very clear like, oh, he was like tapping into like, I need to make a movie about our like 9/11 collective trauma, but do it as like an alien invasion movie.
Yeah, don't even get me started about that era of Spielberg. We could be here for another 6 hours. Like that is very much Spielberg's nihilistic period.
Yeah. Well, Jason, do you have any last Village thoughts to leave us with?
No, I feel like we kind of came to the point where you guys agree with me that there's a lot of quality here.
Yeah, this is kind of in the middle. This is in the middle tier of M. Night for me. Of like, I think the ending. I think this is not a very well written movie, but I think this is a very like impeccably directed movie, if that makes sense.
I will take that as a win in our movie joust.
I was gonna say, I think this is very much it's a glass half full, half empty kind of thing. Like I think we're all agreeing it's the same level. It's just we're coming at it from different perspectives of what that level is.
All right, well, let's end the episode by taking the temperature of the box office right now. Josh, you saw a movie this past week that I'm really interested in, and I'm sad that I missed. You saw Steven Soderbergh's ghost movie Presence.
I did, and
how was that?
It's one of the rare times for me where, because it was such a low-key film, I was able to avoid any sort of logline, any sort of trailers. It's one of the rare times in this business of ours where I was able to go in 100% cold. The only thing I knew was it had Lucy Liu and it had the dude from This Is Us in it, who is a really good actor by the name of Chris Sullivan. He was buried in, tons of makeup for Guardians of the Galaxy 2, but was really good in that. And so I admired the director. I liked some of the cast members, so I was on board. And just from the opening moments, it just reminded me of the joy of, this sounds like a backhanded compliment, and I don't mean for it to be, but like the joy of no expectations.
Oh, okay.
Like going in and saying like, all right, movie, show me what you got. Like prove to me that you need to exist. Like for this, it was just like, it's Soderbergh. It's a cast that's willing to play. I'm in. Let's see what you do. And, I don't think it's spoilers to say, because it's literally the opening scene. This is a film where, it's got a lot in common with Nickel Boys, where it is a film that is it's shot in first person. The whole movie is a POV. And
is it the POV of like the people in the house, or because I don't really know anything?
You are in the POV of the ghost.
So
it is a ghost story where the audience is the ghost. And it takes a minute to get used to, like within the first 15, 20 seconds, it's the ghost kind of wandering through the house and giving you a tour of the geography, because that's going to be important later. But I was like, oh no, this is like watching somebody else play a video game. Am I going to have to leave? Am I going to get sick? And so, I will say that like there's a, trigger warning if you experience like motion sickness really easily, but it does kind of calm down after the first couple of scenes. But yeah, it's, you can tell now why it was such an ultra low budget film, which is it's on one set. You're in the house the entire time because the ghost can't leave the house. So you have scenes with the family like out on the back porch where the ghost is kind of watching them through the windows. And the screenplay from David Koepp does a really good job of keeping all of the like plot stuff on the back burner, because it treats these characters as like, one of my big pet peeves about movies is where like characters are delivering exposition to each other because the audience needs to know, not because the characters already know. So there's like some hints that there's some like stuff, some family stress going on, but we don't have these big monologues about like, how dare you embezzle funds from your job or what, like we don't have that. There's just these hints of like this family's dealing with real world stuff that the supernatural stuff is putting added stress onto. And so I liked that once again Soderbergh kind of treats the audience like grown-ups and says, I don't need to, spoon feed you this information. Lucy Liu is great at playing a very specific kind of parent who, and I'll be vague on that, but like she can be both really unlikable in times, but you can also sort of see why she's making the decision she is, even if you don't agree with them. And then, you've got Chris Sullivan as sort of like the mirror image of her kind of parenting, where he feels like because certain family members maybe aren't getting the sort of attention they deserve because attention is going elsewhere, he feels like it's his job to kind of fill in the gaps for the family members that aren't getting what they need, and so the easiest description of the movie would be yet another one of these like, well, the effects of trauma on the family unit and all like that. It would be really easy to kind of roll your eyes and say it's another one of those films, but because of the way Soderbergh is approaching it, I really, really liked what he did. And he doesn't overstay his welcome. This is a tight hour and 25 minutes, which great. More of those, please. And again, it leaves you in a place where it doesn't fully connect the dots for you, but you're still thinking about stuff that happened after the film is over, which I'm all for.
I got to ask, are you guys confused about Steven Soderbergh's career?
No, I think I love that he is like the most, like, he just wants to try stuff.
I think in his career, I think he knows he's playing with house money at this point. He's like, I've made my career. I know what movies are going to be mentioned in the first 2 lines of my obit, and so for the rest of my career, I make them cheap enough and I have enough famous actor friends that I can do this. And if they bomb, the studios aren't mad at me. And if they're hits, great. It lets me make more.
But what I'm confused about is he could do more. There's no question about that, for the very reasons that you all cite. And I'm just so disappointed that we get, 5+ years of a string of stuff for Netflix, I get that he's experimenting or doing something, just for himself that's not big budget, but frankly, they don't matter that much. I mean, no one saw The Laundromat.
I wonder if that's
no one saw
like
High Flying Bird. No one saw Timmy.
I would argue that's a bummer that they didn't. High Flying Bird is fantastic. I love Timmy. It almost made my top 10 that year.
I would almost say not like, I feel like the answer to that question is like Moneyball broke him. Like there was that period in like the early, was it like 2013 where he was like, I'm retiring, like, and he gave that like massive keynote speech where he was like, it's so frustrating just the process of trying to like get a movie made on a certain budget and like the amount of, wheeling and dealing you're having to do and like what you're having to deal with financiers and stuff like that. And obviously he's still trying to do that, but I feel like his recent output, if it maybe doesn't feel as sort of like big and seismic as like what he could be doing, like his stuff in like the 2000s, like it's maybe he's just sort of found like, I'm kind of comfortable. I want to be like making stuff and sort of like, if I can do it kind of at like a smaller budget and like do it for a streamer or shoot it on an iPhone or something, like I'll just do that and not have to deal with like the stress of, trying to convince people to like give me all of this money.
My only point is I'm bummed that we're not getting more significant films from him, because when he puts his mind to it,
Yeah.
it's great. He's one of the great filmmakers of modern times. He just is, and he's able to make great films and draw great performances while also making them super entertaining. I mean, my God, Logan Lucky's one of my favorite movies of the past decade.
I can't tell you how excited I am for the Michael Fassbender, Kate Blanchett spy movie that's coming out in a couple months. Yeah,
the Black Case or the Black Box or whatever, something like that. Yeah,
it just looks to me like Soderbergh, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which exactly. he has such an innate. We should probably just put a pin in the Soderbergh conversation for when that movie comes out. But
yeah, it's coming out like March or April, I think.
He's just someone who I feel like better than anyone. Like he's like a Howard Hawks. Like he just sort of understands movie stars and understands what is likable about certain people. And like that's my favorite mode that he's in is when he's just like Julia Roberts, George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Daniel Craig, Kate Blanchett, whoever it is, just like come in and like I understand like what is appealing about them to people, and I just want to do. He seems to be in a zone now where he's like, I'm here to provide the middle, whether like kind of getting to that thing of like he could be doing more or could he not. Like that seems to be his project. Just come from kind of my opinion of like we've lost a whole kind of like middle tier of like crowd pleasing movie for adults that is not like an Oscar movie and is not like Batman versus Superman, and it's just sort of like whether I gotta make it at a streamer or whether I gotta make it on an iPhone, like that's what I kind of want to be making because like no one makes those anymore.
But and to close this conversation, because we got more to talk about, we're going forever as we always do. This is my point that he could have been doing more of this, and we've been getting a lot of experimental, and I'm not sure, and I'm just making this for a streamer, and I don't want to say he's cashing a paycheck because he doesn't need, after the Ocean's films, he doesn't need a paycheck. But I look at his career, I look at the past decade or so, and I'm like, it could be more. If you're going to make movies, like in 2013 or whatever, 2012, 2013, he'd made Magic Mike, he made Behind the Candelabra, which was a great
really good
HBO miniseries.
I think that's another thing that broke him was like him having to do that for HBO, and for years and years people telling him like this movie's too gay. We can't give you $100 million for this.
But he made those and he said, I'm stepping away. I'm like, oh, that's tragic. And then he came back, he made Lucky Logan, and you're like, yes. And I'm just bummed that I haven't had any other yes since then. From him. Some of the films are very, very good, but they haven't been culturally significant. They haven't really reached a wide audience the way his early stuff, with the way the Ocean's films did, the way Aaron Brockovich did, Magic Mike, that kind of stuff. So
I saw a horror movie this past week as well. I went and saw The Wolfman. Which I wish I could say I enjoyed as much as Josh enjoyed Presence. I was looking forward to it because it's Lee Winnell doing it, who obviously like he's written like a bunch of the Insidious and Saw movies, but like I don't know about you guys, I was really like impressed and surprised by his reimagining of the Invisible Man a few years ago with Elizabeth Moss, of just taking a character that I'd always kind of written off as like, that's sort of a silly one, or like, I don't really know how you can make that like scary for modern audiences, even though like the 40s Universal movie is pretty fun. But him finding a way to reinvent that old school Hollywood monster movie.
It's a good horror movie, yeah.
Yeah, and find a way to make it scary and suspenseful and play with like negative space. And so I was like, oh, maybe he can find like a cool, fresh take on the werewolf mythology. And there's like a couple like cool moments in there. He tries to make this one, which has Christopher Abbott and what's her name from Julia Garner.
Garner, who's the reason this. I haven't seen the movie. I'll see anything Julia Garner's in, although I may skip this one. But I love her. She's great.
I would say put this in your pile of like I'll wait for streaming or like wait for an airplane. Like I think I walked out. It is not bad per se. It is a like okay werewolf movie. I think the take that Lee Winnell seems to have had is like, what if I kind of try and do it like a Cronenberg movie where it's like a slow like body deterioration thing. And there's like a couple interesting sort of like visual or stylistic choices that he's making that I'd never really seen in a werewolf movie before. But you kind of get to the end and the movie's like a little lopsided, and he's like also trying to kind of do this Shining thing where it's about like a fractured family that like comes undone, and like that aspect of it doesn't really work. It was just a movie I went in with maybe not expecting like greatness, but similar to like Invisible Man, of like I'm excited to see like this old Universal monster movie kind of get reinterpreted with like new modern eyes. And what we got was a sort of like halfway there, if that makes any sense. And to just sort of feeling like this is kind of just sort of like an okay werewolf movie. And if you're into an okay werewolf movie, I would say wait and stream it on Peacock or watch it on an airplane or something. But I kind of walked away like afterwards, like that was, you know, fine, I guess. And then in like the days since seeing it, it's like really like evaporated from my brain. I would not say where this has something like, you know, hearing people like you guys' age, like your age, Jason, like talk about like when American Werewolf in London came out and like seeing the transformation stuff and that and being like, holy cow, like I've never, you know, the new bar has been set about like what you can do with
Man,
this,
what a moment.
with this
that
subgenre. And this doesn't quite have anything like that. And obviously like not to spoil what the Wolfman looks like, but it's a little even the design of the Wolfman is a little bit like we got halfway there. You know what I mean? So unfortunately I think it was kind of a disappointment for me, but if you're really into werewolf movies, check it out on streaming, I guess.
I think the driving question is it better than Teen Wolf? Because like
it's better than Teen
Michael
Wolf.
J. Fox.
Teen Wolf, you know, yeah, Teen Wolf. I think is a terrible movie. Like I hate Teen Wolf, but if you want to propose that on a later episode, we can argue about it. I hate Teen Wolf.
No, it's not good. I'm being sarcastic. It's a really bad movie, but
the basketball scenes. I'm a basketball fan, huge basketball fan. The basketball scenes in Teen Wolf are just some of the worst that you've ever
I'm not
seen.
even a basketball fan and was not even that good of a basketball player in high school. And I know the basketball scenes in Teen Wolf are like, that would not be allowed. That would be a foul right there.
No rule says a werewolf can't play basketball.
Yes. Jason, you had a rant you wanted to end us out on.
Yeah, there's a new film in theaters this weekend that the three of us all saw back in November. September 5th is what it is called. I don't understand. Paramount Pictures acquired this film back in August. It played, I want to say at Venice or one of the other film festivals.
I think it was Telluride because I had a friend who saw it at Telluride, okay. So I think it was there.
Wherever it was, it drew absolute raves. It was on my top 5 list. It's one of the best movies of last year, and with the right kind of awards campaign, would be a strong Oscar contender. It's the story of the ABC Sports, I want to stress, sports broadcast crew in 1972 who suddenly find themselves covering the biggest news story of the time, which was Black September, a Palestinian terrorist organization taking hostage the Israeli Olympic team and subsequently killing everyone that they took hostage. Spoiler alert for something that happened in 1972. But it's a film about what happens to these journalists who are forced to cover a live terrorist event, something that's never been done before. As someone who's Jewish, as someone who is a journalist, as someone who loves sports and the Olympics, this film hits every single quadrant of what I'm interested in. but it's
a real like film. Designed in your brain, just sort of like unspooled.
Exactly. But it's a really great film, incredibly directed. Not a lot of name actors in it, but the performances are like this is one of the best ensemble performances you'll see in a film this year. My rant is no one fucking heard of it. Paramount, for some reason, they originally planned to release it in November or early December. They then said, oh no, we're going to do January 17th. It's January 17th. It's in like 100 theaters. I don't understand what it is, why they haven't given this a little bit of an ad campaign, why they haven't put some members of the cast out there to do interviews and generate some buzz for it. Why they haven't done an awards campaign, because it's awards quality. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. This film's going to disappear. No one's going to pay attention to it. No one's going to see it. And I don't know why the studio did that, because everything else about it, other than the studio, is worth paying tremendous attention to and admiring. One of the best films that we've gotten in the past year.
Yeah,
Totally agree.
I wonder if like how much of it is like maybe there's someone who can like explain this to me, because like I've never understood like the award season strategy of like we're gonna like save this till like the last day of the year and release it, out of like the idea of like short-sightedness, but like that thinking never really works. I feel like the last several Best Picture winners are not movies that were released on like December 31st. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand how like this year it really felt like there were so many movies that like, I don't know whether it was because of the strikes or bad, like, you know, PR campaigns or something like that, you know, it was just like, we're just going to dump bunch of stuff at the end of the year. And then they end up like a lot of titles just end up cannibalizing each other. And we had like months this year where like, or weeks where nothing was coming out. I wonder how much of it is just that like dumb old school Hollywood awards campaigning versus like, you know, maybe like some sense of cowardness on the studio's part of like, we don't want to release, we don't want to do too much press for this movie because like we don't want to risk like having to be asked about like real world stuff that's going on. Like, I don't know where the line between that two stuff goes on, but like the let's dump our movie at the end of the year and like Oscar people will like will automatically like write it in for everything. That doesn't ever work.
What they're doing is, and Josh, I want to let you get in, but what they're doing, Jesse, is they are letting the film's quality do all the selling. What they were hoping was, oh, this is going to get a bunch of Golden Globe. It got a few. This is going to get a bunch of Golden Globe nominations. It'll get a SAG award, and it'll get Oscar nominations, and then we'll release it. And so all the work will have been done for us by the film. And what's stupid about that is that's not how the awards season works anymore.
Or like sometimes it works with something like The Brutalist, but like you can't have like 3 movies that are like have that strategy work for them. It's just it's crazy to me.
Yeah, when you do that, you're gonna have one movie that kind of like sucks all the air up out of the room, and the others suffocate. I think what's happened with September 5 is a combination of, this is a weird Paramount year anyway. Like, you know, it's a studio in trouble. So, you know, you have the financial aspects there that I think they had bigger things on their plate than award season this year. And so award season's kind of an afterthought. And then you've also got, they're releasing this the weekend before inauguration in a country where we are just politically exhausted and politically defeated and tired. And so I think you're like, okay, we're in a weird headspace anyway. Let's throw one of the worst terrorist attacks in the history of the world in at the same time. And I'm with you. For a movie that tackles what this tackles, it doesn't feel like it wallows in grief and torture and misery in any way. It's very much focused on the journalistic aspects.
Yeah, it's not about the terrorist attack.
It's very process driven.
Yeah. And so I think for us, for journalists, we're like, yes, A+, we're in. That is what, you know, old school journalism where you actually have to do legwork and research and chase down this stuff sounds fascinating to us. But I think that's a tough sell for a country that's just like, we're tired, man. We're tired. And so again, that's a really long-winded way of saying I think this comes down to timing. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm with Jesse. I think if you would release this like right after the film festival, when you had buzz at its peak, if you had Paramount swoop it up, put it out in October, early November, I think we'd be having a different conversation.
I just wish. So the biggest star in the film is Peter Sarsgaard, who plays Rune Arledge, who is a legend in television. If somehow you had, I don't know, Matt Damon, there are a number of bigger. Not that Peter's, you know, nothing wrong with Peter Sarsgaard, but he's just not a name. If you had a slightly bigger name associated with this, God, George Clooney. George Clooney could have played that role, and this film would have gotten the attention it deserves. And I'm just bummed that more people aren't going to see this. Yeah, you're right. It's a process. It's a process film, and it's a film built for journalists. But it's still a great movie, and there are some just ripping performances in it.
It's fantastic.
Well, guys, it's been a pleasure arguing about M. Night Shyamalan and release strategies with you guys. We'll catch our listeners in the coming weeks. I think we're going to try and talk about The Brutalist. I hope you guys are going to join the Brutal Boys hive with me. But until then, I'm gonna go have a cigarette and a black coffee in honor of David Lynch. So take care, everyone.